It's nice to be back. And you're going to see me a little bit for the next few weeks until the end of June. So I'm looking forward to being here with you. So tonight we're going to look at resolving conflict biblically. Who likes arguing with people? Nobody? Some people do, you know. Some people really enjoy arguments. And some people really like conflict. They do. Have you ever been around somebody that's always stirring or causing conflict? It's awful, isn't it? How do you feel when there's a conflict on the inside? Not good. Not good. Anyhow, here we go. Let's go. So last time I was here, we looked at whose problem are we solving? Do you remember that? And we went through all the stages with empathy, empowerment, exploration, education, and more empowerment. Who's actually used that? The strategy that he gave us last time. Have you used it on anybody? Yes? Did it work? Yes? That's good. Did you use it? Did you use it, Margaret?
Yes, we realised it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was actually speaking to somebody the other day, and I'm saying to them, so what are you going to do about it? And what did you do about it? And I thought, and then I remembered all this, and I thought, I must have, I was hearing the words that he'd said, so, that's not very good, but what are you going to do about it? What have you done in the past, and what are you going to do now? So that was really good. So let's have a look at this. Psalm 133 is a very important psalm for this because unity commands a blessing. I'm not going to read it all for the sake of time because we're just going to plough through this very quickly until we get to the nitty-gritties of how to resolve conflict. Is that okay? Yep. We have key scriptures for conflict resolution. Just see where I am with my notes. I'll put them away, which wasn't very bright to do that. Hebrews 12:1, it says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. And Ephesians 4:1-6 says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavouring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. I won't read the other two, but you can see that we are called to walk keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. One body, one Spirit, just as we were called in the hope of our calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all in all and in you all. That's really powerful. I think that was a really good idea to put my notes like that. Anyhow, let's see. Conflict means, on your page 2 of your notes, I'm pretty much going to go through the notes on the PowerPoint. What I did was I created the notes. They're quite full so that you've got detail all the way through the notes. So when you go back to read them, you'll have a whole picture of conflict resolution. I won't go through everything because there's too much in there. But conflict means to strike together. It's a state of open, prolonged fighting, a battle or war, a state of disagreement or disharmony between persons or ideas, clash, conflict over water rights. That was an example. It's psychology. It's an emotional or mental disturbance resulting from opposition or simultaneous functioning of mutually exclusive impulses, desires, or tendencies. It's opposition between characters or forces in a work of drama or fiction, especially when motivating or shaping the action of a plot. Who's heard of this strategy? Win-win and win-lose. Have you heard of that? Have you all heard of these strategies? Yeah? So I don't need to go over them again. No? Tell me. Or, yeah? You want to go over it? Yeah? So in a battle, you've got different scenarios. You've got win-win strategies or win-lose strategies. Win-win means you both feel you've got a good outcome. And that's really the best that you can hope for, that you get a win-win situation. Both sides benefit from a scenario. Any resolutions are likely to be accepted voluntarily. So it's integrative bargaining aims to achieve through cooperation win-win outcomes. Win-lose means I win and you lose. That's a good outcome for me, but it's not for you. So one side perceives the outcome as positive. So that's not really a good situation. One person may get what they want, but the other might not get exactly what they want from that scenario. Lose-win means I lose and you win. And then the worst one of all is lose-lose, when nobody can actually come to an agreement. So there's loss on both sides. And that's not a really good scenario to be part of. Win-win defines the conflict as a mutual problem, pursues joint outcomes. I'm back in the little box at the top now. Finds creative arguments that satisfy both groups, uses honest and open and accurate communication of groups' needs, goals and proposals, and avoids threats to reduce the other's defensiveness, communicates flexibility of position, which is really good. And win-lose defines the conflict as a win-lose situation, pursues the own group's outcomes. It's all about me in that situation. I win, that's it. Forces the other group into submission. Uses deceitful, inaccurate, misleading communication of groups' needs, goals and proposals. Uses threats to force submission. Communicates high commitment, rigidity regarding one's position. When somebody says no and they won't move, no, the person that says no holds the power, really. If you can't change it. And sometimes you just cannot negotiate with people. There's nothing worse than actually not getting a resolution to something, is there? Because you're just left frustrated and unhappy. Sometimes you can't actually get a resolution and it's not your fault. Who's ever had that happen to them? That you've tried to resolve something and you can't. And it's not your fault. You've tried everything. Hear that so often, especially with parents and children, especially adult children. They've tried everything to get their children back on side and reach them, and there's just no give on the other side. And it's quite heartbreaking, really. So let's look at this. We've gone through that. We won't read that. Let's go to Matthew 18:15 to 18. We're going to look at private matters of dealing with conflict. And that's dealing with a sinning brother. Verse 15 says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. How often do we practice that properly in church or in life? Do we do that? Do we do that rarely or often or not at all? Very rarely we do that, I think. And we need to learn how to resolve conflict biblically. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. I don't think I've ever seen it get this far. If he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. Assuredly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So that's the actual strategy for personal, individual sin in biblically. So then corporately within the body, there's quite a few scriptures up there. Let's see which one we'll pick for a minute. What about Titus 3:10-11? Reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning, being self-condemned. That's pretty harsh, isn't it? So that's corporately. There's quite a few scriptures in your notes, so you can go through those yourself later. We'll keep going till we get to the nitty-gritties. I like Luke 17:1-4. Jesus warns of offences. Jesus said to the disciples, "It is impossible that no offences should come, but woe to him through whom they do come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea than he should offend one of these little ones. Take heed to yourselves. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him." That's what Pastor Glenn said, wasn't it? "And if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in a day, 7 times in a day returns to you saying, 'I repent,' you shall forgive him." So we've got to have forgiveness in our hearts as well. So how often do we say, no, I don't think I really want to forgive that person? I'm sure you've done a whole big session on unforgiveness at some point in time, have you? Yeah. It's amazing how unforgiveness can tie people up. So we're going to look at this model. It's called a model called the slippery slope. It's taken from a book. It's called The Peacemaker. And it's called A Biblical Guide to Resolving Personal Conflict. And the author is Ken Sandy, and he's actually given us permission to actually use this, which is a real blessing. So he said, as important as practical skills are, the focus always has to be on motive. So really it's a heart thing, isn't it? It's what's in our heart. If our desire is to honor Christ, everything else will follow. And this is the diagram I want to have a really good look at tonight with you. It's called the slippery slope. And you can see on that slope, on the left-hand side, we have got escape responses. And these are how people deal with conflict. It doesn't matter whether it's within themselves or amongst other people. The first one on the bottom is, hang a minute, where's the one I'm looking at? The first one, sorry, third on the top, denial. People can deny that there's anything even wrong. The second one on there is flight. Another way to escape from conflict is to run away. How many people actually run away from conflict here? I don't like conflict. I've actually learned over the years to deal with conflict better, but I wasn't very good at dealing with conflict. I just did not like conflict of any description. I would run a mile and hide. Another way to escape from conflict is to run away. May include leaving the house, ending a friendship, quitting a job, filing for divorce, changing churches. Running away postpones a proper solution to the problem, so flight's a harmful way to deal with conflict. But there are times when it is appropriate to run away. It may be a legitimate response in seriously threatening circumstances in the case of physical or sexual abuse. And every reasonable effort should be made to find a trustworthy assistance, come back to seek a lasting solution to the problem. but that doesn't always happen. Especially like domestic situations. And then the third one on that is suicide, which is sadly very prevalent in our nation. When people lose all hope of resolving a conflict, they may seek to escape the situation or make a desperate cry for help by attempting to take their own lives. Put your hand up if you know anyone that's tried to commit suicide. One. Is that all? Just one person? Two? Nobody else? You've never actually met anybody that's tried to commit suicide? Oh yeah, you have. Yeah, I wondered. Yeah, it's very common. It's sadly all too common, especially in youth. Youth suicides huge, and Indigenous suicide rates are really high as well. And also suicide rate amongst men in retirement age, over retirement age, is actually very high as well. So suicides are really a huge issue. And that's when people really totally lose hope and they just don't know how to sort it out. So, and it can also be a spiritual issue, but sometimes it's just circumstances. Then in the middle, no, we're going to look at the other side now, the attack responses. It's pretty full on, isn't it? You don't actually, when you say the word conflict, you don't really think about the big picture of what conflict is, do you? So the attack responses are used by people more interested in winning a conflict than in preserving a relationship. You know, sometimes people just want to win no matter what the cost. The attitude is seen in people who view conflict as a contest or a chance to assert their rights, to control others or take advantage of the situation. Attack responses are used by people who are strong and self-confident, but they may also be used by those who are weak, insecure or vulnerable. These responses are directed at bringing as much pressure to bear on opponents as is necessary to eliminate the opposition. Then we go to assault. Some people try to overcome an opponent by using various forms of force or intimidation, such as verbal attacks, including gossip and slander, physical violence or efforts to damage a person financially or professionally, says see Acts 6:8-15. Such conduct always makes conflicts worse. Then number 2 is litigation. That's on that right-hand side there. And I actually know of a situation at the moment where something happened and it could have actually easily been quite resolved biblically in a context, but one person decided they were going to go to court. They wanted to press charges, and the whole affair has blown into such a mess. It's got the potential to destroy lives. It's got the potential to destroy even ministries, and it could have been resolved biblically if they had been willing to sit down and talk. So when it comes to litigation, it's really pretty serious. It just says lawsuits damage relationships, fail to achieve complete justice. That's exactly right, isn't it? The courts don't always judge, we would say, fairly. They do judge, but sometimes the outcomes are not what we think justice should be. When Christians are involved in both sides, their witness can be severely damaged. That is why Christians are commanded to settle their differences within the church rather than in the civil courts. And we've seen that happen even within the church, like the Catholic Church, all the things that have been going on within that, you know, all the sexual abuse things that are surfacing after all those years. So it doesn't give the church a good name, does it? It doesn't give Christianity a good name at all. So if you can resolve your conflict biblically without going to court, then that's the best thing to do. The next one is murder, which is pretty extreme. We've gone from suicide on one side to murder on the other side. And that's just extreme. That is an absolute extreme response to conflict, that you'd think you'd have to kill somebody to get a solution. While most Christians wouldn't actually do that, we should never forget that we stand guilty of murder in God's eyes when we harbour anger or contempt in our hearts towards others. 1 John 3:15 and Matthew 5:21-22. So 2 ways that people actually enter into this go through here. 2 ways that people move into the attack zone. Some resort to an attack response the minute they encounter a conflict. Have you ever met somebody so defensive that you can't actually reason with them? They've got such big walls up that you can't even get a reasonable outcome from talking to them. Others move into this zone when they've tried unsuccessfully to escape from a conflict. So that's the reasons why people actually move into conflict. When they can no longer ignore, cover up, or run away from the problem, they go to the other extreme and attack those who oppose them. So attack's not a good way either to resolve conflict, is it? So let's look at the responses in the middle, which are your actual peacekeeping responses and peacemaking responses. Let me just get this. It says these responses are commanded by God, empowered by the gospel, and directed towards finding just and mutually agreeable solutions to conflict. They'll be discussed later. Well, we'll discuss them now. The first 3 are referred to as personal peacemaking because they're carried out peacefully and privately, just between you and the other party. Isn't that the best way to do it? If you can do it that way without involving other people. There's nothing worse than getting dragged into somebody else's conflict or argument and the he said, she said scenario. There's nothing worse than that. It's actually really awful. I've learned a really good saying, not my circus, not my monkeys. Have you heard that one? Yeah. So it's like somebody starts saying something to me, I'll go, no, not my circus, not my monkeys. It's like, no, it's not my thing. It's like, no, you've got to just keep me out of this and sort it out yourself. So it's a case of keeping your boundaries as well in those situations so you don't get dragged into it. When we start agreeing with something or someone, that's where that thing gets power. There is great power in agreement. So if we don't know 2 sides to a story, we don't have the right to agree with anything because we don't know what the truth really is. Because 2 people can tell you a totally different version of what situation. They could be in the same situation, but one will tell you one side, one will tell you the other side. Could be totally different. So when you start agreeing with one or the other, and then you find out, well, that actually is not the truth, you're in the middle of a conflict. And we don't need that. Let's have a look. This one. The first 3, okay. To overlook an offence, that's the first one. So we're told we need to be able to overlook offences, not offence. Offences. Where's that one? Proverbs 19:11 says, "A man's wisdom gives him patience. It's to his glory to overlook an offence." So, how can you tell when somebody's actually offended with you? Can you? You can, can't you? It actually it's awful when somebody's really offended with you, or you get offended yourself. It doesn't feel good. So the next one is reconciliation. it says, if an offence is too serious to overlook or has damaged the relationship, we need to resolve personal or relational issues through confession. Loving correction and forgiveness. If your brother has something against you, go and be reconciled. So how often do we do that in church? Do we do that? We do. Two do. A lot of people don't. But it's biblical to do that. So that's what we're really meant to do. Go there. Even negotiation, we're meant to negotiate this, like those 6 up the middle. You can read through them all later. Even if we successfully resolve relational issues, we may still need to work through material issues related to money, property, or other rights. That happens quite often in relationships, separations, all that kind of thing. This should be done through a cooperative bargaining process in which you and the other person seek to reach settlement that satisfies the legitimate needs of each side. Philippians 2:4 says, each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Then mediation. If 2 people can't reach an agreement in private, they should ask one or more objective outside people to meet with them to help them communicate more effectively and explore possible solutions. It says, if he will not listen to you, take 1 or 2 others along. These mediators may ask questions and give advice, but they have no authority to force you to accept a particular solution. The next step is arbitration. So then you listen, you may appoint 1 or more arbiters, I can't say that word, to listen to your arguments and render a binding decision to settle the situation. And Paul, in 1 Corinthians 6:1-8, Paul indicates this is how Christians ought to resolve even their legal conflicts with one another. It says, if you have disputes about such matters, appoint as judges even men of little account in the church. So, there you go. Then we go to accountability. If a person who professes to be a Christian refuses to be reconciled, do what is right, Jesus commands church leaders to formally intervene, to hold him or her accountable to Scripture, and to promote repentance, justice, and forgiveness. If he refuses to listen to others, tell it to the church. Direct church involvement is often viewed negatively among Christians, but when it is done as Jesus instructs, lovingly, redemptively, and restoratively, it can be the key to saving relationships and bringing about justice and peace. So we're nearly done, probably 5 minutes, and then we're going to do a quick role play for 5-10 minutes, and we're going to practice what we're really going to learn about the steps to peacemaking. So you can have peace-faking, peacemaking, or peace-breaking. I'm not going to go through that, but we don't want to be peace-fakers, do we? No, we don't want to fake it. It's not good to fake things. It says, when the author said, when I use a peacemaking response, my focus is on us. I'm aware of everyone's interests in the disputes, especially God's, and I'm working towards mutual responsibility in solving the problem. So let's go through this now. Let me just put this up. So this is what we're going to actually think about tonight. On page 9 says the 4 G's of peacemaking. It says God uses conflict to stretch and challenge you in carefully tailored ways. This process is sometimes referred to as the ABC of spiritual growth. Adversity builds character. I don't think any of us like that, really, do we? We like it to be smooth sailing. As you worry less about going through conflict and focus more on growing through conflict, you will enhance that process and experience the incomparable blessing of being conformed to the likeness of Christ. And that's really the goal of becoming Christ-like, isn't it? Being conformed to the likeness of Christ. So the 4 G's of peacemaking says, the 3 opportunities of conflict give rise to 4 basic principles for peacemaking. So the first one is you glorify God. So your heart says, how can I please and honour God in this situation? That should be the first thing we think. How can God be glorified in the middle of all this mess? That's quite simple, isn't it? Really? Then the next one is get the log out of your own eye. That's good, isn't it? How can I show Jesus' work in me by taking responsibility for my contribution to this conflict? In other words, how did I contribute to this? Did I contribute to this, and how did I contribute to it? Because sometimes we actually contribute to conflict without realizing it. Then number 3 says, gently restore. How can I lovingly serve others by helping them take responsibility for their contribution to this conflict? So, you don't want to say to someone, well, you did this, and, and point the finger at them, or else they'll put more walls up and go, well, you said that. And then you'll get into another big battle and there'll be no resolution. So we've got to find ways of communicating so that we don't, point the finger, and we've got to take responsibility for ourselves. So it says, and then number 4 says, go be reconciled. How can I demonstrate the forgiveness of God and encourage a reasonable solution to this conflict? So the first thing you do is you define the problem and stick to the issue. And you stay on topic. Have you ever tried to have a session with someone and they go off on a little bunny trail about 10 years back or something, and you're actually trying to solve something that happens like it's happening now, but they're bringing up something that was like 10 years ago or something? You've got to stay on task, stay on the subject and on the issue. Clearly define the issue, stay on topic. Pursue purity of heart. So that says, take the log out of your own eye, then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Confess any way you might have contributed. We've already said that. Plan a time for the discussion. So don't just pounce on them. Plan a time when you can meet with the person. Say, hey, I think I need to talk to you. Can we meet? Can we talk about this? Because it's really upsetting me, or, I'd really like to sort this out with you. And most people will actually come to the party. Well, the conflict resolution party. Don't do it when you're tired, stressed, and distracted, because you'll be grumpy and you'll be less patient, perhaps. Let's go for the next one. And then it says, affirm the relationship before clearly defining the problem. So you say, a relationship's important to me, but when you don't return my calls, I feel rejected and unimportant. So you're saying, I value your friendship. I value who you are as a person. But when these things happen, I feel like this. When we argue, it really makes me upset, or rejected, or however you feel. If you can put your feelings into words, avoid blaming the other person, like saying, you made me feel. But you say, when you do this, I feel like that. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're going to practice this in a minute. So you can turn obstacles into opportunities to demonstrate the love and power of the gospel. And then you'll know the deep, abiding joy that comes through obedience to God's word. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. I didn't say peacekeepers, I said peacemakers. A peacekeeper will keep the peace at all costs, even to their own detriment. A peacemaker will resolve conflict and make peace. So now we're actually going to do an activity, but I need a volunteer, please. Who'd like to volunteer for me? Do I have to pick somebody, or You're going to volunteer for me, Deb? That's nice of you. Thank you. Did you get anything out of that so far? Well, there's more on the handout, but I won't go through that. You can actually read it later. Strategies for conflict resolution on page 11, and basically how you handle it above that. I'm going to just do one scenario, and then you're going to do the other. You're going to take maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do another role play amongst yourselves. You want to come up, Debs, please? And I'll find my notes for this. So do you think you can resolve conflict now? Do you think you understand conflict a bit better? Nobody's talking to me. That's sad. Yeah, when you don't talk to me, I'm feeling sad now. That's sad. There we go. So, right, I've just been informed. Scenario 1 says you've just been informed that your long-term friend Debbie has been speaking to others about a disagreement you had with each other. Act out how you would deal with this in a way that glorifies God, serves the other person, and contributes towards reconciliation, peace, and unity. So we're going to do that now. We're going to give you a demonstration. Is that okay? There you go. Come, Debs. So the conflict is regarding catering options from a party that had been held a little while ago, because we had a few issues when we did that event. Oops, that's okay. You okay? I would approach my friend and ask if I may speak to them regarding something I have heard. I would say something like, "Hi, Mary," or "Deb. I just wanted to know if you have time for a chat. I just want to clear something up with you."
Yes, fine. When would you like to do it?
Oh, we can do it now if you like. Okay. Debbie, you've been my friend for a long time, and I was sure you would come to me if something was troubling you. It's regarding the disagreement we had a while ago regarding the party we organised. Someone told me you'd spoken to them about it. In fact, a couple of people have come to me. I'm sorry that you felt that you couldn't come to me. Is there something that is still troubling you? I thought it was all forgotten, but there must still be something you're not happy about. Would you like to tell me what it is so we can work things out?
Well, when we had the disagreement regarding the catering that we should book for the party, I was sure that I was right in thinking that the catering should be done by an outside catering firm. But obviously it wasn't. I just felt that it created a lot of work for others and put a burden on them having to bring food. It upset me that people had to do a lot of work for the night when a catering service could have done it just so much better. You didn't take my advice on the board, that's all.
Oh. So she was a bit upset, wasn't she? Yeah? So I'm sorry you felt that way. I had no idea it was so important to you. Please forgive me if I appeared to make the decision without taking your feelings into account. May I tell you the reasons that I chose to do it the way I did?
Yes, I'd really like to know that. Yes, I just felt bad for the people having to bring something when they could have just come in, sat down and enjoyed what had been put in front of them.
Well, people have so many food allergies, I thought it was easier not to order food from a set menu. Most people were happy to bring something, and there was extra food brought in just in case people didn't bring anything. There was no pressure on anyone to bring anything. There wasn't a lot of work either, as people helped themselves to food, and packing up was all done by a couple of people at the end.
I didn't think of the part about food having been food allergies, etc. I guess I can eat anything, and I don't like cooking much. So on reflection, I think I was thinking about myself and not others.
Oh, That's okay. I'm sad you felt you had to go to others to speak about it. Next time, please will you tell me what you're feeling at the time so we can discuss the issue and find a resolution. I really appreciate your friendship, and I'd like us to be upfront and honest with one another. Is that okay? Thank you for allowing me the time to discuss this with you. I'm glad it's resolved now.
I'm sorry too. I didn't mean to talk about it. I guess it was annoying me. Next time I'll come to you. You are my friend, and I don't want to have anything come between us that will cause division. Please will you forgive me?
Of course I'll forgive you. Now let's go and have coffee and a chat. Let's leave the past behind us and move on, and we'll have a hug. There you go. So, thank you very much, Deb. So can you see the steps that we took in that, relating to the 4 steps of glorifying God and taking responsibility for ourselves? Where's my 4 steps? We defined the problem, we stuck to the issue, we tried to keep our hearts right in the process, and we affirmed our relationship. So now, have we got 5 minutes, Glenn? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Yeah? Okay. So now, amongst yourselves, well, you're already sitting in groups, so maybe, yeah, if you want to go like in pairs, 2 and 2, that would be good. At the back table, is that okay? Unless you want to move, Teresa, and go, you all right? You okay? Okay. So if you break into pairs, and then the next scenario is one of your work colleagues has been very quiet with you. You used to speak regularly, but during the past 2-3 weeks, they walk right past you and they don't engage in conversation. Act out how you would deal with this in a way that glorifies God, serves the other person, and contributes towards reconciliation, peace, and unity. So you can have 5 minutes to work that out amongst yourselves and have a little practice. Is that okay? Do you think you'll be able to follow the steps to do that? Yeah?